One thing which we haven't done yet is decide like how our website will look, what would be its colors, would it be a dark mode or a light mode? Usually I go for the dark mode, but I thought like I would challenge myself and make this website in light mode. These are the colors which I have chosen right now. This would be the primary color, and I haven't used the secondary color anywhere, so let's use them on these buttons. Okay, so this would be my secondary color. So like I'm going for a single monotone theme. So now let me go and make the layout of everything that would be here. I have added the footer as well. I would make them clickable links. And so basically like I'm going to do the all the styling and add all the information on the web page now. Okay, so let's review what we have done on the homepage so far. So we have added a background image with a text here that shows us like what is our website. Here we will show our recipes. These have hover animations with them. And I have also added the footer. I'm not too happy with this, but yeah, let's go with this for right now. And we have also fixed the home bar as well. So if we go to any recipe page and we come back to makeameal.com, it will come back to the home page. So yeah, all of this is fixed. These cards basically have images in them, and I want to remove this button basically, or maybe not remove this button, but I want these whole cards to be clickable. So when we click this, we should go to the next page. In order to add the image over here, we would have to have a dynamic URL through which we can get the image of a noodle, image of a thukpa, or any other recipe we have. We created a text field called cover. This will basically contain our URL for that specific image. Now I have collected some assets for our dishes, and these would be our assets. And I have also collected some data about these. Instead of having these random dishes over here, let me populate the database with the actual data that we are going to use on this website. So we are going to have Hakka noodles, Manchurian, spring roll, and sweet sour chicken instead of these two. We also want to change something in the recipe model. Basically, what I have thought while creating the website is that I would have a to-do list for displaying on this page, basically. So I'm going to have two to-do list. One to-do list will show us the ingredients so that user can check box whether he has collected all the ingredients. And then he can go to next page and there he can basically fill out all the steps that he needs to do in order to create this dish. Now these all these tables have been created when we have done the migration. So let me fill up the data with actual data we are going to use. I have collected some things from in the internet. In order to fill the data, I could have used raw SQL queries or Django admin panel. But I've created queries like this. Basically, I can write all of the stuff here. So I've written all the ingredients, then I can match recipes with them. So these are all the recipes for Manchurian, which is referenced by M. For sweet and sour chicken, I'm referencing the recipe as SSC, and then I can use the recipe over here. So like it gives very good interface to filling up data, and I can see everything here before I make the database queries. Okay, so we have ingredients. These are the ingredients. They are related to the recipe, so all the relations have been created. So yep, well and good. Let's look at our home page. It would show these four recipes. Great. Now I will go and stylize the front end for the specific recipe page. Before I go and styling this page, I want to note one more thing as well, that we want to have some images over here. These are like static images, but we want to have some dynamic images. For example, Hakka noodles will have different image, Manchurian will have different image. And in future, if you change something, then it should be dynamic. These images which we have added in the background, these are static images. So we can put them in a React project and they will be shared automatically. But recipe images would be dynamic images. So we need to store them in the database. We added this field, the cover field, which would basically contain the URL. So I have the images for all the dishes over here, but we would be sharing these images using some kind of server. For example, Nginx, we would be using Nginx. What we want to do is we want to store these relative URLs in the database. So for Hakka Noodles, we would have slash dishes slash Hakka Noodles so that we can share this basically page. The images would have a proper URL. So let me do that and explain you a bit more. So as you can see, we are returning some relative URL over here, slash dishes slash Hakka Noodles. What we can do is add some part of URL over here over which these images are shared. Because when a user accesses our website, his browser needs to know that where is this image. And basically, this is a relative URL. So the server can't know where this image is. If we open up this URL in the browser, it would basically do a Google search or do not found. So we have this live server extension in VS Code. Now our live server is running. Okay, so we have this URL, and if we open Hakka Noodle, so we can access Hakka Noodle's image on this URL. And instead of this meal image, we want to show this URL. So let's see. Yep, great. Right now, all the images are being filled with Hakka Noodles, but we have this part dynamic and coming from the API. So let's replace this. Okay, great. So now we can see that all the images are visible here. So this is useful when we are going to next page as well. So here we want to replace the static image with the cover image. So yep, let's go and design this page as well now. What we also want to do is store this basically URL because this URL would change when we are going to deploy our app on production. So we want to replace this URL and put it in an env file. And then we can use this variable instead of this URL. Great. So you can see we can still access the images, but our URL is stored in an env file. So when this will go to production, we will change this. Okay, I'm happy with what has resulted here. So if I go to any page, it would open up its page and it would open up its ingredients, and the user can click here to check whether he has selected those ingredients. And then he can click on I have collected all ingredients, then he can proceed to steps. Now I understand this doesn't like looks very well like these steps, like how would the user make these, but this is to show just a concept here that this is how something can be made, like a cooking website. If I had some more time to spend into this, I would have created more organic feel to the website and added more details in the steps and made it more user friendly. But right now, this is just an example project website. So I'm happy with this. Next, in the same step, designing front end step, I would like to add one more thing is I want to have some icons here for Instagram, YouTube, as well as I want to place some icons at the top. So in order to add icons, basically, I can use a font awesome library, which provides us with icons. So let me integrate that. Okay, I'm happy with the results. We have added three buttons here. These would be clickable and we can go to different links. Now let me finish up a few more things. For example, this card needs to have a proper height. Few more other UI things. We finish up that, then we will look into how we can deploy this website and make it visible publicly. All right, I'm quite happy with the website so far. So I have fixed the spacing here. So all of these cards have now equal height. I have added a box shadow here. I have added all the links here as well as here. So if we click on any of these links, it should get me to that page and open it in a new tab. In our A tag, this target specifies that we want to open this link in a new tab because we don't want user to close our websites. One thing I also need to do is attach the API to this form. So basically user can enter his name and some comment, and that comment would be attached to this recipe basically. So I need to attach the backend API. So I'll do that now. So we can see that I have added the form and I've added some validations as well. So if we don't provide a name or a comment, it will show us that it requires something. Enter something and we submit it, then it would give us basically the data we want to send to the API. So let's attach the API now. Great. So if we add some comment here, the request would be made to the server and we would see the comment here. If we refresh the page, the comment should stay because this is coming from API. So yep, great. Let me fix the styling here. Now, when we are done with our website and I think it is ready for the people to see, we should go to the deployment step. So before I go to deployment, I should save my stuff. So if we open up GitHub, we can see that our repository just now committed some changes. So let's move to step 8, making things production ready. Before we can deploy things on production, we have to make some changes in the backend and the front end as well before we deploy it. So some things you must understand before you make your code production ready. There are two things to deploy here. One is the front end, one is the back end. The difference between two related to production is that front end files are static files, whereas back end files are dynamic files. What I mean by that, like front end files won't change. So let's say there is an image. If we request an image today or tomorrow or day after tomorrow, that image would be same. The response would be same. That's why these things can be cached in the browser. They don't need to be requested again and again from the server. Whereas dynamic files, so for example, our comments, our recipes, these might change in future. Whatever the comments are today, they might not be the same tomorrow. As well as front end, there is no computation. We just basically are serving files from the server and displaying it on the browser. Now, browser may do some computation, but we are not worried about that. Whereas the backend, we have to do some computation. For example, we want to find out the comments. So we would fetch from database whatever comments are. Let's say we order them, do some computation, and then give the response back. So that's why they require some computation. So this front end stuff, this can be hosted on any static website. This can be a server, this can be an AWS EC2 instance, or basically anything. What we are going to choose here is AWS CloudFront. Whereas the backend we are going to deploy on AWS EC2 instance. So when we are deploying things to AWS CloudFront, we don't have to manage many things as hosting static files is simple. Whereas if we are talking about deploying backend to an EC2 instance, we would require two things. Basically, a server within our server machine. So we would require something like Apache or Nginx and Unicorn. And we also require a database from where we would be fetching data. So this is the basic path we are going to follow when we are making things production ready and when we will deploy it to production. But before we do all of that, we need to make some changes in our code. If you look at the front end code, we have these URLs which are requesting right now recipe and recipe comments, but our backend won't be hosted at localhost on production. So what we need to do is to store this varying path in a variable so that we can change it in the production, and basically in our current development environment it would be different and in our production it would be different. So let me do that for all of the code. Great. So now we have stored our backend URL in a variable and we are using variable everywhere. We can basically change this environment variable when we are deploying things on production. And basically then our front end would point to the our production. So let's move to step 9, deploying backend. We would be deploying backend first. For deploying backend, we need a server. This could be any server. We could use an Vercel server. We could use AWS Lambda, but we would be using here AWS EC2 instance. So let's open up AWS console and go to EC2. Now, I won't be showing you in detail how to create an EC2 instance. Let me go and create an EC2 instance. I will explain the major points that we have to take care while we are creating an EC2 instance. And the OS we are going to choose is Ubuntu because I'm most familiar with Ubuntu. And I think you should be choosing this as well if you are a beginner because you can find a lots of support for Ubuntu for simple things. Here we need to create a key pair login. This would be used to log in into our EC2 instance. So this is quite important. Let's create a new, and everything else can be. Okay, we can see that the EC2 instance is running. So let's open it up. Here we have its public IP. So let's copy this. Then we can open up any terminal. Let's use VS Code here. This is the complete command, but this won't work. I'll show you that in a minute. So it will show the error that this is to open. That means the permission for this file are to open. So we need to make sure that the permissions of this file are ch400. That means only read access to this user. Great. So we are logged into the server machine now. Now we need to come to our GitHub repository and we need to create something called deployment keys. Now we can add a deployment key over here. These would give just the read access so that we can pull our code into our server. To create such key, we need to use SSH keygen command. We can use something like this. Let's copy this and paste it here. Great. So the SSH key has been added. Now to go to now we need to go to our repository, copy the SSH URL. So our entire code is here. So let's see which Python version is installed here. Python 3.12. So we need to create a virtual environment here, but I don't think that would work as well because we would require some, yeah, we require this package basically and bunch of other packages. So you can. While we are doing this, we should also make some changes in our backend code. If you come to our backend code, you can see that our password is hard coded right now, which is fine for now, but in production, we want to have this in an environment file as well because the host name and the user and the password for production database can be different. But for simplicity, I'm going to keep the same username and password here on the server as well. But one thing we need to do is install GUnicorn. So our requirement file has GUnicorn in it now. Let's commit this. Okay, now let's come to our server and do git pull origin master. Okay, so it has installed Unicorn and packaging. Next, before we start our server, we would have to install Postgres. Now by writing /l, we can see there is only one database, Postgres. So we need to create our own database. Okay, great. Our server has started. It is asking us to do migrations. Now let's see if we can run our server with Unicorn. We can see two processes are running for Unicorn. So now we need something called Nginx. What this Nginx would do, it would provide us a reverse proxy. We don't want to see a port in our URL. We just want to access our server directly without the port. So that's where Nginx reverse proxy would help. Okay, great. We are getting the response from Juniper now. But if you go to our instance detail and access the public IP, we won't get any response from here because we haven't provided any inbound rules yet. Okay, great. So we are getting some response and we can see our endpoints here. We should turn off this debug mode so that we don't see any of this content. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on getting this to production. Now, at this step, we are done deploying our backend. Our backend is accessible at this IP, and these are the sub URLs which we can access like in normal API. Let's go to front end now and see if we can access our front end. Instead of local URL, we give our public URL. Okay, let's add some data. Okay, so basically we have added the same data which we added on our development. So let's see if we can access our recipes now. Great, we can access our recipes now. And these are coming from our backend. But you see, one problem is our images aren't getting loaded. So we also need to serve these images. Now we can serve these images as static files, but I'm assuming these recipes will change in future and we would have more recipes, we would have different images. So we need to store these with our backend server. Okay, so we are getting a different error, 403 forbidden. This is because Nginx doesn't have permission to access those files basically in the media folder. Okay, great. So I can access these files now. So what I've done is added media folder in Nginx so that Nginx can find the files from there and serve them. But due to some permission issue, I have to move this folder to slash media in root. Okay, so let's see if we can access them in our website. Great, so we are done with deploying our backend. Now we need to deploy our front end. Now this would be the last step, deploying the front end. This should be pretty simple. First of all, we need to make sure that our env file is correct. It is okay. Now Wheat is giving me some errors because I need to clean up some things. So let's do the cleanup. So TypeScript was complaining about the interfaces and type definitions. So I did all of that. Now our build function is completed. It has generated a test folder in which all of our files are there. So we have this index.html. This is basically our starting file. So all of these are static resources and we need to serve them using a server. So before I can serve them via CloudFront, I need to make an S3 bucket and great. So this bucket has been created. Let's upload some files now. Great. So our S3 now contains all our static files. Now let's go to CloudFront and let's use the recommended setting. And it gives me the error that I must update S3 bucket policy, which we will do a bit later. But this is quite important. If you don't do this, you won't be able to access your website. Default root objects as index.html because this is what we want to access when we access the URL for this CloudFront. Now gives us warning that our S3 bucket policy needs to be updated. So let's copy policy and open this in a new tab. So basically what this means is we are not directly giving access to S3 to any person, but we are going to give access to CloudFront to access our S3 resources. Now this will take a bit to complete, so let's wait for it. You can see a last modified date, so the deployment has completed. Now if we copy this domain, we should be able to access our website. Now why aren't we loading our recipe? Okay, so our backend API aren't being hit because of mixed content warning. So this is an error which is caused because our CloudFront application is being hosted on HTTPS and our backend server is on HTTP. In order to fix this, the standard procedure is to generate an SSL certificate and put it in our backend browser so that our backend server can also be hosted on HTTPS instead of HTTP. But what we are going to do for now is access our website on HTTP instead of HTTPS. So now when we access our website on HTTP, the requests don't fail and we should be able to see these recipes here. Yeah, great. So at this point, our application has been deployed on production and this was the last step. So thanks for watching and do subscribe if you want more content like this.